Hello, McDude here, and what you're looking at is the Ares 7 Mun test rocket. It was my first rocket that I tried to go to the moon with. It is loosely based on the Delta IV rocket design, and by that I mean I have the main rocket in the middle and two boosters on the side. Aside from that, it has nothing in common with the Delta IV whatsoever. However, you'll notice that I have an outfitted lander on top, and with this, I plan to try to go to the Mun. So, what can we say about the Mun? Well, first, what an eyesore! It looks like a big Swedish meatball that's been dropped on the cafeteria floor of an IKEA. Second, it has been the dream of Kerbals for thousands of years to travel to this nearby body because that's what people who live on planets do. Third, because it's there. And people who live here always have a burning desire to go there. And with that said, to the launch pad. Once on the launch pad, I let the camera settle in, and then I go into map mode. And map mode always puts me on the opposite side of the planet. So the first thing I do is I try to zero in on the Space Center, and something unique happens. The camera sort of goes wild and just starts going, constantly revolving. I take my finger off the keyboard just to confirm I'm not hitting the wrong key, but then I hit keys to stop it, to go in the opposite direction, and it will momentarily pause, but then it resumes rotating. And this goes on for a few seconds as I fight the camera. It rotates. I try to stop it. There was a pause. There's a pause, and then it resumes on its own. Finally, I'm able to orient it, and the cause of this was a bit of a mystery. I had to go back out to the map, orient it down onto it. I never did understand why that happened. It had never happened before. It's never happened since. So I'm left to assume it wasn't a game glitch or a bug. It was, yes, I've gone to the Mun before. I just wasn't very successful. But anyway, I'm left to assume this wasn't a glitch or a game bug. This was just something with my own equipment, my keyboard or mouse or something. Because it's never happened since. Anyway, we throttle up the engine, and we launched the spacecraft. And one of the first things that happens is the spacecraft goes into immediate rotation after launch. And this is different from the camera issue that I had moments ago. Now you notice the engines I'm using are the LVT-45 engines. They're the thrust vectoring engine. They're not compensating for this rotation. I did forget to turn RCS on at the moment of launch. But with SAS on, the LVT-45 should be stabilizing the spacecraft, but they're not. Finally, I turned RCS on to try to fight the rotation, and it does slow it down to some extent, but it doesn't solve the problem. It keeps firing as the spacecraft keeps rotating. You can see that on the nav ball. So I gave RCS and SAS a little bit of time to fight the situation and solve it. Unfortunately, they weren't able to. and my booster power was quickly running out, and I was nearing 10,000 feet, which is where I needed to nose over east in order to get into orbit. But I soon realized that it was just after I turned SAS off and the spacecraft just started rotating out of control, I realized it was just impossible to nose over east. It was impossible to stabilize the spacecraft. So we started using the abort feature, and I've used the abort feature before. And I don't know why I waste my time going to this thing, because it doesn't work. I mean, you click the yellow and black bar, it comes out, the little red thing shows up with a triangle, you click on it, nothing happens. I don't know if I'm using it wrong, or if the feature doesn't work in the demo, or what the situation is. You know, they say that the definition of insanity is you keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect different results. And maybe I'm just crazy. But after clicking the abort button for a long time, I finally decided it was time to just abort the mission manually. So I go in, I blow off the boosters. That looks pretty. It's pretty useless, but it's pretty nonetheless. I start going through features, and you have to ignite everything or go through every stage systematically. So I turn on engines even though they're throttled down, and before I can get to finally the ejection stage, the decoupler stage. I decouple the main booster, and even with the lander free as it's falling, it's still rotating. And by this point, navigation is completely out of control. And oddly, the entire time of this madness, Bill Kerman is smiling, which is unusual for Bill, because he has a high cowardice level, or I should say he has a low courage level. It's not until I blow off my remaining stage that Bill Kerman finally begins to panic just a little bit. He screams for a little while as my boosters fall away. And we're really not that far from home. We're not that far from the Space Center. You can see it off to the left. Boosters falling everywhere. Booster shadows showing up. We're descending rather quickly now. I thought about using time acceleration, but this actually goes pretty quickly. So after we deploy the parachute, I speed the video up about 4 times. The trip from about 500 meters down to the surface is kind of slow and rather tedious. That said, we have a safe touchdown, and we have Bill EVA from the spacecraft, from the capsule. We'll zoom in on Bill just to check him out, see if he's okay. He climbs down the ladder to the surface. He climbs back up again, climbs back down, does a little dance. He's happy to be back on the ground, safe and sound. And then he starts his long walk back to the Space Center because we got work to do. So next up, we go from the Ares 7 design to the modified Ares 7 design. Basically, I take the same rocket and I go from instead of 2 boosters, I go to 4. I add the R8 winglets. I also upgrade the engines from the RBT 45 with a thrust vectoring to the RBT 30s, which are slightly more powerful. But I compensate for the lack of thrust vectoring with the R8 winglets, which will give me more stability, more control within the atmosphere. I have a few staging issues that I should have dealt with in the vehicle assembly building. Instead, I deal with them on a launch pad, moving some engines around, moving some staging around. Again, this is not really my second attempt. This is my second recorded attempt. I've crashed and burned a couple of times before I decided to start recording. But this is the second time I've actually recorded it for you. So we launched the spacecraft, and there was a little bit of torque, a little bit of turn on launch, on liftoff. SAS and RCS quickly dealt with that, along with the R8 winglets, which you notice are kind of active as we continue our ascent. I'm also using the fuel cross-feed lines to go from the outer boosters into the main engine. That way, when the outer boosters burn out, the main engines will still have full throttle, or full power, full tanks, I should say. And at 5,000 meters, Bill Kerman is screaming. At 10,000 meters, we rotate the map around. I get ready to disengage SCS. I disengage SCS in order to do the turnover to east, but the craft starts immediately rotating wildly. Again, it just rotates out of control. I reactivate RCS and SAS to stabilize the spacecraft, as the R8s, the R8 winglets just aren't doing the job on their own. They fight the spacecraft to a degree. I turn RCS off, hoping that the winglets will solve the problem. And they really don't. You see them doing the best they can, fighting everything all along. But again, I'm at 33,000 meters, and I can't do the nose over to east. And after I blow off the boosters, I lose the R8 winglets, which means, and I'm still in the atmosphere, 44,000 meters. The atmosphere tops out at 70,000 meters, and I need to do the nose over soon if I'm going to do it. I'm getting in the outer limits to where I can do it. I mean, soon I won't be able to do it at all. One of the problems with a long spacecraft is that they're very, very difficult to stabilize in atmosphere, especially after you've blown off your boosters with the winglets attached. They're difficult, if not impossible. Well, there comes a point to become impossible to stabilize. And you're just over relying on monopropellant on the reaction control thrusters to stabilize the craft. And this is something you have a very limited supply of. So when I get to the Mun, I'm going to need that stuff. But at the moment, I'm needing to stabilize myself in the atmosphere. It's becoming obvious where this is going. As 60,000 feet, 60,000 meters, pardon me, almost out of the atmosphere, I've just lost control of the spaceship. So I've killed the power. I've turned the thrusters off, and decided to abort the mission. I'm not going to screw around with that stupid abort button, the yellow and black bar, because it never seems to work. And at this point, I'm just playing with the system. I'm trying to figure out what's wrong and how to stabilize it. I still have 43,000 meters to play with, and that gives me a chance to try to determine if there's some sort of formula or some sort of action I can take to stabilize the craft, to make the boosters work. Finally, I get to a point where I just have to blow off the main booster, so I do that. And I continue to play with things on the way down, try to figure out if there's some sort of solution, at least without changing the design. There doesn't appear to be. After parachute deployment, I speed up the video about 4 times as we drift down. Try to orient myself in relation to the Space Center. It's an uneventful touchdown, a safe touchdown. All in all, it's a successful mission, unless of course you take into account that we failed to go to the Moon. For that matter, we failed to get out of the atmosphere. But regardless, we did manage to set Bill down safely, so he can head back to the Space Center and get back to work. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. And if you don't, feel free to comment and tell me what I did wrong. I am McDude, and I'll catch you next time.